Everybody, it's Murders Taylor, social service agency over here on 105. The love of my life works. Her name is Joy Lane. We've been together 3 years. We're supposed to get married, but it was just some that I just couldn't deal with her anymore. But anyway, she's the reason why I'm making this video. She's the reason why what's about to happen today, because she can drive me crazy. Past years been really funny, you know. Being with Joy, she drove me crazy. Started making me gamble. I lost everything. I lost everything I had, man. I'm out of options, and now I'm just on some murder type. So what I'm gonna do is, because she works here at Murder Taylor, this is over in 105. I'm gonna try to get as many people as I can over here. You know, so Murders Taylor and Joy Lane.
April 16, 2017, in my opinion, has become one of the most infamous days in American history. To everybody, that was just a regular Easter Sunday, but to one person, it was the day that completely changed his and other people's lives forever. I reintroduced to some and introduced to others Steve Stevens. And what is Steve Stevens most known for? Well, this gentleman here is Robert Godwin Sr., a 74-year-old African-American man. There's not much information about this gentleman, but from what I found out, he was born September 7th, 1942, and he was a foundry worker, which basically is a welder. And doing my calculations, let's just say he started this work at the age of 18. This would put him in the year of 1960. So let's take a look at a life for a young black man in the late 1950s and early 1960s. They had to deal with what I call real racism. In that time period, that generation of young black females, and especially young black males, weren't offered the same opportunities to an extreme degree that we have today. My grandparents are 9 years younger than Mr. Godwin, and my grandparents are thankfully still alive. And I remember the stories my granddad would tell me of how limited job opportunities and even education for that matter was for young black men and black women. Like having to use restrooms only designated for people of color. And another example is them being in school, getting hand-me-down textbooks and many other things that the white students didn't want. They got. Even having the N-word scribbled in a couple of their textbooks and on their desk as the insult to injury. For a young black man in the 1960s or the 1970s, depending on when he started working there, to be working as a welder, that means he worked his behind off to get to the position where he was at. He was a gentleman with 10 children and 14 grandchildren. Now back to Mr. Steve Stevens. There's not much information on his father, but he was the oldest of 3 children. His mother, Miss Green, was a clerk at the justice system in Cleveland. So again, I'm not the smartest person in the world, but I think being able to have any job in the justice system in any city is a great accomplishment. I may be overselling it to others, but the way I was raised and what I was taught, I just respect positions like that. For either of these gentlemen, there wasn't much information about them, but I was just trying to figure out the backstory and were there any clues to anything that can be noticed. Even the infamous serial killer Ted Bundy himself described this in one of his last interviews, which was the driving force for him to commit the crimes that he did.
I've met a lot of men who were motivated to commit violence just like me. And without exception, every one of them was deeply involved in pornography, without question, without exception, deeply influenced and consumed by an addiction to pornography. There's no question about it. The FBI's own study on serial homicide shows that the most common interest among serial killers is pornography.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's real. It's true.
Killers like John Wayne Gacy, Jeffrey Dahmer, they were killers that suffered from molestation and abuse. It was something that drove them, and I was trying to find if that were really the case with Steve Stevens, or was it just used as an excuse for him to do what he did. To my conclusion, there was nothing that I found that was detrimental and could logically drive him to do what he did. I mean, Steve worked with children, and according to the people around him, for the most part, he was a level-headed human being, but it was according to his ex-girlfriend. Steve was someone who had a serious gambling issue, and not just any gambling problem, a gambling problem that led him to going bankrupt and practically losing everything that he had. Now, according to Joy Lane, she gave Steve an ultimatum to choose between her and gambling, and he chose destruction of himself and others, despite the voicemail being left before him taking his own life. The Steve Stevens story is sad for many different reasons, and they all hurt because an innocent elder lost his life, and many people on both sides are scared from the tragedy that came about from this. What is one thing that we can learn from this situation? Black men especially, because I'm speaking as a black man, but really black men in general, please do your due diligence and take your mental health seriously. And even when things seem absolutely terrible, you have to keep in mind that things could always be worse. Now, those things are easier said than done, but honestly, they can be done. In my opinion, what would have been a logical solution? Patience. I feel if Steve would have been patient, there may have been a different outcome, because in my opinion, he did what he did strictly off of impulse. And when he realized what he did, it was too late to reverse anything. Now, I could be completely wrong, because I'm from the outside looking in. But in my opinion, he was completely wrong for what he did, and everything that happened, he deserved. Because in the end, you don't do stuff like that to people. But I personally wish he was man enough to face the destruction he caused, because when you take your own life, you cheat every other person that's affected from getting closure. Mr. Godwin's family will never have that closure they seek, and neither will the family of Steve Stevens, because I'm sure his mother didn't raise him to be the person he became to the world. But because he chose to go down the path he went, those questions will remain unanswered.